The descent began not in the undercity's dead arteries, but in the heart of Nocturne's Vale, the vampiric burlesque club where velvet drapes muted the sound of the city, and crystal chandeliers cast fractured light over a stage that promised both danger and allure. The air was thick with perfume smoke, and the low thrum of a bassline that seemed to vibrate the bones. Behind the stage and its glittering curtain was a door that most assumed led to prop storage. Tonight it was unlatched, the back hall narrowed quickly, its plush carpet giving way to damp stone stairs that descended into the dark. Buzz and Zeno took point, each holding a fragment of the blueprint map they had recovered from the Temple of Knowledge. A series of incomplete sewer schematics inked in curling script, the missing sections filled by hastily drawn overlays. The mismatched fragments made sense to no one but them. The hive-born and the scholar murmuring over junctions and distance markers in quiet, confident tones. The air grew heavier with each turn, the walls slick with condensation, the echo of dripping water layering over the hum of unseen machinery. The smell of oil, mold, and rust mingled in the narrow spaces. It was in one such corridor, where rusted grates bled into a deeper tunnel, that they found Nocturne. She was still walking, still able to speak despite the pain, but her skin was an unending canvas of suffering, lines of writing carved themselves into her flesh in real time, jagged and deliberate, as though an invisible quill was etching words directly into her. Each sentence shimmered briefly before sinking into her skin like a wound, only for the next to appear. The markings read like fragmented confessions, names, regrets, unfinished apologies, as though she were a gateway for the departed, their final thoughts and bindings to the mortal coil spilling into her body. Without hesitation, Tracer, Elijah, Luther, and Calamar moved to support her. Every touch drew a shudder, and yet she leaned on them without resistance. She was heavier than expected, as if burdened not only by her own weight, but by the countless lingering spirits carving their stories into her flesh. They turned back through the dripping tunnels, retracing their steps to Nocturne's Vale in search of someone who could help, a patron or contact who might understand such an affliction. But the map called them further. Buzz and Zeno traced a new route, deeper still, leading the group beneath the city's oldest foundations, where the brick turned to smooth stone. The group pressed on until the tunnels widened into a marble-floored antechamber. The door stood at the far end of the marble-floored antechamber, its surface an intricate mosaic of polished brass, obsidian glass, and silver filigree. Etched into its towering height were 5 vertical columns of symbols, unfamiliar to the untrained eye, but clearly deliberate in their placement. Between the columns, suspended from the doorframe by thin chains, hung 5 small chimes of varying tone, their metal dulled by age. Above them, A semicircle of polished mirrors caught the party's reflections, fracturing them into warped fragments. Its surface an intricate mosaic of polished brass, obsidian glass, and silver filigree. Etched into its towering height were 5 vertical columns of symbols, unfamiliar to the untrained eye, but clearly deliberate in their placement. Between the columns, suspended from the door frame by thin chains, hung 5 small chimes of varying tone, their metal dulled by age. Above them, a semicircle of polished mirrors caught the party's reflections, fracturing them to warped fragments. It was not a lock to be forced. Along the frame, faint script in an archaic dialect suggested 5 ideals: guilt, remorse, justice, punishment, forgiveness. The puzzle revealed itself through experimentation. Each column of symbols corresponded to one of these ideals, and the chimes, when struck, would cause the mirrors to flicker faintly, showing ghostly script that hinted the correct alignments. The party worked methodically. Guilt, a symbol like an eye with a drop beneath it, inverted in shame. Remorse, a spiral and winding lines faint at the center. Justice, balanced scales stylized to resemble interlocking gears. Punishment, a jagged bolt bisecting a circle. Forgiveness, an open palm rendered in delicate lines. When each was aligned correctly, the chimes rang in a rising harmonic sequence, and the mirrors settled into still clarity, reflecting the group as they were, whole and unbroken. With deep, grinding sigh, the door's mechanisms released, and it swung inward.
Beyond lay a vast chamber, its stone walls carved with towering reliefs of armored sentinels, each one in a pose of eternal vigilance. Their forms were heavily stylized. Squared shoulders, faces hidden behind expressionless visors, hands resting on the pommels of great swords. In the center of the chamber, on a low dais, a pedestal of dark stone held a floating object, a hollow, square frame of bronze, its edges engraved with angular runes. Up close, it was clear it was a key, though its design was unlike any the group had seen. As they approached, Hunter misjudged the footing, slipping into the shallow, oil-slick liquid that coated much of the floor. The surface shimmered like black glass until disturbed, ripples echoing outward. The disturbance triggered a deep, resonant crack. 3 of the wall-carved guardians shuddered, their stone shells splitting apart to reveal clockwork interiors, gleaming brass and steel beneath. The clockwork guardians stepped down from their alcoves, servos winding, gears interlocking, their eyes lit with cold sapphire light as they advanced. The group moved as one, entangling limbs with rope and chain, striking joints to disrupt gear timing, and hammering blows into weak points until one by one, the clockwork guardians ground to a halt. As the last collapsed in a heap of cooling brass, a heavy door at the far end of the chamber clicked open. Before leaving, Tracer spotted something. a thin, folded page wedged between the door frame and stonework. She slipped it into her belt without a word, concealing whatever was written there. The crawl. Beyond, the air grew warmer, damper, and the scent of scorched metal and charred flesh clung to every breath. The corridor opened into a long, mesh-floored causeway spanning a yawning drop. Below lay a cavernous, extinguished furnace, its massive ducts and chimneys still radiating the ghost of long-lost heat. Halfway across, movement stirred. Four worm-like creatures surged up through the grating. Their bodies formed of bundled muscle fibers and exposed nerve cords, twitching and flexing with unnatural precision. They slithered toward Buzz, drawn to his internal warmth. The fight was brief, but violent Tracer's breath erupted in a cone of ice, freezing two of the creatures solid before they shattered under follow-up blows. The other two met similar ends under blade and blunt force. The sealed door. At the far end of the causeway, a massive sealed door blocked the way, half hidden behind a toppled column that had wedged against it. The group worked together, straining to shift the column free before Tracer's frost, and a shield bash shattered the lock mechanism. Inside, they found a chamber unlike the others, a containment room, its walls fitted with cracked conduits and rusted restraints. The floor was scored with deep claw marks, and faint stains hinted at something both organic and alien. The walls pulsed faintly with residual heat from some ancient system. Hints lay everywhere. The crawl they had encountered was not a random infestation. This was likely its point of origin, some failed or abandoned containment for a singularity that had since been removed. The Oracle's choice. As the group turned to leave, a voice reverberated through the chamber. Harmonic, mechanical, and inescapable, the clockwork Oracle spoke. Three paths choose. Shut down, reprogram, leave as it is, and leave. The group chose reprogram. At the back of the room, a doorway slid open, revealing a narrow, dimly lit hallway. As they proceeded, the space grew tighter, forcing them into a single file line. Halfway in, panels along the walls flickered to life, revealing a display in bright, hard white light. One must merge with the system to reprogram it. Without hesitation, Bud stepped forward. He retrieved his spare hive-born queen from within his chest cavity, a dormant ember of his colony, and placed it into the Oracle's integration chamber. The hallway sealed behind them. A low vibration hummed through the floor as they felt themselves rising, the motion steady and mechanical like an enormous elevator. When the motion stopped, the side wall slid open, revealing they had returned to the Oracle's chamber at the beginning of their descent into the vault. But now, the walls were overgrown with thick crawl vines pulsating faintly, as though breathing. The humanoid. The group began to re-engage with the Oracle, but soon the air was broken by wet, slopping sounds echoing from behind them. Slop.
splat, slop, squelch. They turned. A humanoid figure emerged from the narrow hallway they had just left. Its body composed entirely of exposed muscle fibers and twitching nerve endings.
The battle was brutal. Each strike cut deep, but the creature moved with stubborn vitality. Then, before their eyes, it began mitosis, its body splitting into two separate entities even as its wounds knit closed. Working quickly, the group pressed the assault, cutting down both halves before they could reconstitute into something stronger. The bodies collapsed into twitching heaps that eventually stilled. With the threat ended, the group turned their backs to the vault for the final time and began their ascent back to the city above. Calvarofitaf.